Hey everyone, welcome to Be the Change. My name is Lily Mott, and today's episode is about how change comes when you're a troublemaker, in a positive way. This week's episode is again keeping with the trend of my last few episodes, and this one features another host of a new Be the Change Media Network podcast. This week I'm featuring Lucy Brodure, who is one of the hosts of the Imperfect Activist, which is a new podcast that launched on May 9th on the network. In addition to being a podcast host, Lucy is a youth development coordinator at UK Youth, as well as a children's rights advocate, and she is passionate about youth empowerment and sports for social change. It was so great to talk with Lucy and to learn more about her work and the Imperfect Activist podcast. So without further ado, let's get started with this episode featuring Lucy Brodure.
I'm Lucy. I'm 24 years old. I grew up in Belgium. However, my mum is from the UK, so I grew up in a bilingual household, French, English, and doing a tennis match during dinner. In terms of professional background, I worked in Asia, Nepal and Cambodia on children's rights and international human rights projects in 2022 and 2023. I now work for UK Youth for the I Will movement as a youth development coordinator. However, I do have a big passion for sports, so I'm a part of the Women's Sports Collective and the Women in Football. And through that, I've just received my football coaching license last week. So I've graduated from my level 1, and I coach small kids from the age of 2 up to 8 years old at Little Kickers.
That is incredible. That was a great intro. So I would love to hear about what got you started with wanting to do social action. I think that you've touched on a lot of different issues. What got you involved in social action, wanting to make change? Tell me that background story for you.
The very first, the root cause of it is probably through Scouts. I was a Scout leader for 7 years and also a child in that same Scout unit, and seeing quite a lot of children struggling financially to just buy something or to just pay for an activity for their child hit me. Especially, I come from a very industrial town in Belgium, which is classified as one of the worst towns in Lonely Planet. But that drove me to have kind of a bit of a fight for children and young people, for them to have equal opportunities in life. And then also through the podcast we're doing with Tash and Annabelle, I do speak about the fact that my first really youth activism cause was when Greta Thunberg came into the media spotlight and striking at schools and then going in the streets and protesting for the environment and for the safety of our planet and nurturing it as well. So I think those two are two different causes, but I think through my professional career and even on a personal value, I've always been connected with children and young people since I've been a scout leader at the age of 15, which I was incredibly young. When I look back at it, I was probably too young, but then I grew up quite quickly after that. So I would say, yeah, definitely children, young people, environment were the first causes I was a big advocate for, and then slowly shifted to human rights, children's rights, and then sports for all and gender equality. And youth activism and youth advocacy has always been a small part of each topic, I feel. So yeah, that's probably the first root cause.
That's amazing. I think, yeah, you really represent a lot of different issues, which I think works really well for the I Will movement and the work that you're doing now, because I think you're able to talk about a little bit of everything, which is incredible. Very intersectional in your social action work, which I think is great. Tell me about your podcast. You touched on it a little bit, and then we'll get back to some of the work that you're doing professionally on the side of the podcast. But tell me about what the podcast is like and how that came to be.
I think, yeah, our podcast called The Imperfect Activist. I think myself, Tash, and Annabelle are a good mix in between. I think it's we bounce on each other for our ideas and complement each other in a good way. I feel also the fact that we do come from 3 different countries, Tash living in the UK. I'm sort of living in the UK since over a year, but grew up in Belgium, and then Annabelle, who lives in Canada. I think it's got this like sort of international perspective on youth activism because, of course, there's like differences in between countries, even between the UK and Belgium is quite different. So having Canada adding that experience with Annabelle is really good. Yeah, I feel like we have like we've had a lot of ideas in terms of episodes, and we've had to break in order to put some on series two if we do have a series two. But yeah, in terms of like subjects, we really want to dig in youth activism, but breaking it in like different topics. So like the first episode will be quite broad on youth activism, but then after we're separating into like housing crisis, mental health, gender equality in sports, climate, environment, also the mid-crisis at 20s and job market, not really positive subjects, but it's the reality of a lot of young people in the world and not just in UK that a lot of young people are facing societal issues and need to have a platform for their voices to be heard. And I feel like we're trying to represent all those young people that have different issues, and we want to address every single one as much as we can. But we're still just three of us, so we're just going to try and handle what we can. But we're very excited to have this podcast together and just to have a lot of knowledge and learning, but also discussions between us three, but also episodes with our guests when we will be doing the podcast solo. So yeah, I feel like very excited. The first episode was recorded just a couple of minutes ago. So it went really well, and I feel like we are a good team, all three together, and I'm really excited about it.
I'm excited to listen. I think that it's going to be such a great addition to the network. And I do think that you all have different backgrounds, but I think coming together to share knowledge, like you said, and to learn from each other and also to share what you've learned is going to be incredible. I would love to know if you could have one dream podcast guest or a couple. I feel like you, with your work being so intersectional, there's probably a wide range of people you could choose from who you might consider to be really inspirational, or maybe that you want to like pick their brains because they're controversial. They might give you some hot takes. If you could choose some dream podcast guests, who would that be?
Well, that's a tough one because I've got loads of names. I would say on the sports for all, sports for social change and gender equality in sports, I would definitely say in my biggest dream, Lucy Bronze, just because she's an incredible footballer, but also on the advocacy and awareness side of things, she's amazing what she does with children and young people, also outside of football, but also in terms of young girls participating in the sports. I feel like she's a trailblazer in that field, definitely. But then in terms of like international development side of things, she's not very known, but in my heart, she's got the biggest heart I've ever met in my entire life. And this woman is called Samita, and she lives in Nepal. And what she did when I hired her, actually, when I worked in Nepal, and I left like a month after she was hired by me, she grew massively and just everything she did with children there in the small village we were in. She just elevated everything in terms of like children's clubs, the library, accessibility for the children and for the children to have a good education there. I definitely feel like she's the perfect picture of someone that needs to have an international platform because the work she has done there has just been incredibly important for all those young people and children. And also, like more Cambodia side, I would say Sri Rodri. She's a big advocate in human rights, and young people's voices are really important to her. And she now works for the Cambodian government, I think. But she was just amazing to work with. That I would be privileged to have both of them on my podcast, if I'm honest. And yeah, on youth advocacy side of things. I mean, working with I Will doesn't make that particularly easy. Because there's so many young people that I work with are just so inspirational in their own way and have like separate journeys, separate topics. And I feel like, yeah, you could definitely do a whole podcast about I Will and like every intersections in between and every young people with their passion on youth social action journeys that I feel like just having someone for the I Will team like Lily. But yeah, it's just yeah, I can't choose one out of like 370 young people, but yeah, definitely someone from the I Will team.
I love that. I think lots of great guests there. Like you said, no shortage of podcast episodes, I'm sure. Can you tell me a little bit about how you, or I guess your choice to travel the world and do this work? I think that it's amazing, your international background, and you've probably had so many experiences doing amazing work with communities around the world. I just think it's so inspirational that you have managed to put down roots and make change in communities around the world. And I think, especially I don't say this in a patronizing way at all because we're very similar ages, but at such a young age, you've gotten to travel and you've gotten to do all of this work. What has that been like for you? Tell me a little bit about that adventure. Do you see yourself continuing to do it? Lots of questions rolled in there, but I just want to pick your brain on that. I think it's incredible. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I would say the root cause of it again is through my mum. She traveled a lot when she was a young person herself. She lived in Norway, lived in UK. My parents met in the south of France. So there were loads of countries already involved when I was a kid, that I always felt very connected with other countries and other cultures. The first time I went alone abroad, I was 17, and it was actually to the US. It was California, to see my mum's friend, and family there. And that was the first time I actually traveled alone properly internationally. And I just fell in love with it like 100%. I felt like this is what I want to do. I want to travel a lot and discover new cultures. I think the biggest step and the most life-changing experience was definitely Nepal. I was 21 years old. It was just before, no, it was during COVID, because I was trying to find an internship back home in Belgium, but because of COVID, everything was closed. I couldn't go abroad. And so, if I'm honest, I had a massive mental breakdown one evening and just sent random emails to NGOs and organizations abroad without actually looking at the location of those NGOs. And then the next morning, I got an email from this NGO called Volunteers Initiative Nepal. And they were like, sure, Lucy, you can come and do your internship in Nepal. And I was like, what have I just done? So I think Nepal was the biggest life-changing experience of my life. I've always said I would never have chosen Nepal by my own, but Nepal chose me. And I felt like this was something that I felt connected quite a lot with the country once I stepped there, and just felt like what I was doing with the NGO there and just talking with children, implementing children's clubs in the communities in the middle of like rural Nepal, Himalayan mountains, 10 hours from civilization. I probably saw less than 100 people in the space of 7 months. But it was just like very peaceful, very heartwarming, and I still miss it to this day. I still think of going back there and seeing all the kids that I worked with, which are now probably teenagers. But that's another subject. But I still talk to some of the kids I worked with in the children's clubs, especially one girl, Mamela. She wants to be a doctor, and I applaud completely her desire to do that. And I just love seeing them sometimes on FaceTime and just talking with them, because I had a very special bond with all of them. I miss them a lot. But also after Nepal, I was like, oh, why not stay maybe in Asia? I did go back home to Belgium to try and find a job, but finding a job in the charity sector in Belgium is very hard. So I just felt like Asia was still calling me at that point. And I was like, oh, why not go to Cambodia? Again, this was a step that I just took without actually really thinking, because I was like, I just wanted the adventure, just wanted to learn as much as possible. And I definitely learned quite a lot in Cambodia on the human rights side of things, being a country that doesn't particularly have a lot of human rights, but working with an indigenous NGO and a local law firm was really exceptional experience that I had, and also connecting with other NGOs, especially a French one called Pour un sourire d'enfant. And they work with children in slums to give them education through working experience, but also going to school. So I think it definitely fueled me to work internationally after having those two experiences, and it's still something that I miss and I would like to go to because I felt like, yeah, working internationally was something that I was always driven to as a child. Also, the fact that I speak three languages does help it. I speak English, French, and Spanish. So I do have that ease of speaking different languages, and I learnt Nepali, I learnt Khmer, not writing. Writing is completely on another planet. I can't do that. But I did try and learn a lot of Nepali and Khmer while I was there, and that definitely helped me to have that connection with the communities I was working in. But yeah, working internationally was life-changing for me, and I still have ties with the people I worked with there. And I just love knowing what they're doing right now and what are their dreams for some of the kids as well, and just making sure everything is all right for them. I think they all know they're still having me, even after 3 years after Nepal. It's a connection I truly had with all those kids there. Was just amazing, and yeah, amazing people I've met, amazing families, communities. A second mum I met there in Nepal called Tara. She was amazing. We didn't speak the same language. We never managed to speak the same language, but she was someone that I truly felt like a second mum when I was there. And saying goodbye to her was probably one of the hardest things I did because we just cried the entire time. She didn't want to leave me. And I was just like, I was a mess. But like the fact we didn't speak the same language, there was still like a profound connection between us. And yeah, language has no barriers for me. I feel like you can still communicate with people through images, through emotions, and that kind of thing. And yeah, Nepal and Cambodia definitely helped me in that, and on my international development side of things for my professional career. But yeah, I do miss it, but I still like traveling a lot. I've just come back from a solo trip in Barcelona. So yeah, it is something that makes me happy, fills me as well, and just seeing new cultures and diversities, learning is a big thing there, and just being nice, happy, having empathy for people, you learn a lot there. But also you learn that you you don't come there to fix problems. You come there to work with the community alongside them and not try and make the white savior aspect of it, of just coming with your ideas and just saying, no, this is right and this is right. No, it's definitely working with communities alongside you to build a project like the Children's Clubs project we build, which is still going on. I worked with all the kids, the schools, the families to build that. So I feel like this was more of a learning curve for me, if I'm honest. And yeah.
That's incredible. Just so much to be learned from that. And that was some great advice at the end. I'm going to ask you to share a little bit more advice. Last question for you. Lots of young people want to create change and make a difference, but they might not know how to get started with that work. What advice would you want to share with those people who might be listening?
Interesting, Lily. I would say not biased at all. Do get engaged with your local councils, with organisations that work in youth advocacy, and implement projects with young people and for young people. I mean, myself, working for the Our Will movement, you do have a platform for your voices to be heard in different aspects, whether it's a conference, whether it's a special event, or just attending one just to gain knowledge and gain more aspects on certain topics. I also feel like the work I do with the UK youth is something that does support a lot of young people across the UK. Also, again, to put all the NGOs together, My Life, My Say is also one to look at too, because voting is really important for young people, and it should be compulsory in the UK like it is in Belgium. So definitely like trying to get your foot in the door. And if someone says no to you, no, don't take it. Just go into another door, or just try and push that door even more. I feel like young people deserve to have their spaces, to have their voices heard, but especially having it listened to and then having actions on what the issues they are experiencing. I feel like the UK is, unfortunately, is one of the best countries in terms of like youth advocacy, even if a lot of people think otherwise. Thinking of other countries that I worked in, and even Belgium, youth advocacy is something that is very not part of the culture, I would say, or like charity organization work. So I feel like young people, in order to get into youth activism, just voice your opinion loud and clear and just try and be a troublemaker in a positive way. But yeah, don't be scared of elevating your voice and giving an opinion, and yeah, go for it. Don't give up. Just have a lot of resilience, but be a troublemaker and push to challenge other older generations or maybe MPs to act on change.
It was so great to talk with Lucy and to share her story and the work that she's doing. You can listen to the first episode of The Imperfect Activist now, wherever you're listening to this podcast, and I've included all of those links in the description of this episode. So go check out that first episode and subscribe to hear future episodes of The Imperfect Activist. And now, to close out this episode, I want to share some of Lucy's advice, which actually also comes up in the first episode of The Imperfect Activist, so it all kind of fits together. But back to Lucy's advice. Change comes when you're a troublemaker, in a positive way. Thank you so much for listening to this episode, and you can find Lucy on Instagram and LinkedIn, and I included those links in the description of this episode, as well as the links to listen to The Imperfect Activist. If you want to talk about anything I mentioned, please reach out to me by email at lily@bethechangepodcast.org or on Instagram at Be The Change Media Network. I'm working on expanding Be The Change Media Network, which means bringing you more inspiring stories from amazing guests and incredible hosts like Lucy. If you enjoyed this episode, I would really appreciate it if you could leave the podcast a rating and a comment, because it will help these stories to reach, educate, and inspire more people. And I would also love to hear your thoughts and feedback. Tune in for my next episode, but until then, be the change you wish to see in the world. Bye, guys.